Hello. So today I want to look at Focus for Android with you. Firefox Focus, or in German-speaking countries called Firefox Klar. And if you don't know what this app is, let me show it to you. So it's a neat little browser that you can use to browse to whatever website you want to. And at the end of your browsing session, you can press on this little trash can icon here. And all your browsing history is gone. So this browser doesn't save anything to disk, and it also blocks a bunch of trackers. So it has a bunch of privacy features. And today I want to look with you at integrating one Android component. So I'm working on the Android components team. We build a bunch of Android libraries that you can use to build browsers or browser-like applications. The last time we worked on Firefox Preview, which is built on top of those components. Focus itself is around longer than those components, so it doesn't use all of them yet. And there's one super important one, and that is the engine component. And a concept component in our case can abstract away what kind of engine you're actually using. So you can use WebView or GeckoView. And in the case of Focus, we are using GeckoView. Focus started as an app that used WebView, but nowadays it is using GeckoView. And the goal of this stream or project, it will probably be longer than the stream, is to replace the direct usage of GeckoView in this application with the component, the concept component and the GeckoView component, so that Focus uses the same code base that Firefox Preview, for example, uses. And let's start by looking at some of the build files, because it has been a while for me working on Focus. So I'm not that familiar with the state anymore. So we are using a bunch of components. As you can see, we already have the engine component here. We are just not using it everywhere just yet. It's probably here because it's a dependency for some of the other components. Let's look at this in a moment. One thing that's interesting is that Focus still has different build types for all of the different architectures we support. That is something we don't do in our newer apps anymore. We let Gradle do the APK splitting. Something we probably can clean up afterwards too. Yes, you can see the ABI is one of the flavor dimensions. So I did a similar thing with Firefox for Fire TV, which wasn't using the engine component as well. Maybe could be almost a year ago already. And the best approach back then was to just completely remove the engine that is in use. And back then it was WebView, here it's GeckoView, and then find all the code that was depending on it and slowly rewrite it. And at some point you are able to launch the app again, and then you work back from the crashes that you see and fix those, and at some point you have a running browser with the new component in it. And then you can do a lot of testing and QA to find all the remaining issues. So let's see. See, we have the concept and we already import where was it? Just saw it here. Already imported browser engine Gecko, so all the pieces are here. We're also importing GeckoView directly, which is something we will not be needing anymore once we use the engine completely. So let's start by just commenting this out and see if we break anything. And while Gradle does its thing, we start to look at some of the code already, like the browser fragment. It's a probably huge thing, probably too huge. But the thing uses the browser engine a lot, so let's look around. Let's start by looking at the imports. We import GeckoView here anywhere. Oh yeah, nested GeckoView. That was a way of getting the toolbar and the GeckoView in sync. So if you scroll web content, the toolbar scrolls away. We needed to wrap GeckoView for that. We don't need this anymore. So I'm just going to delete it. This will come from Android components sooner. Thanks for the stream. Yeah, it's a pleasure. We are not doing the save delete because I don't want Android Studio to go through the whole code base and find the things. I want the code to break and fix it manually in this case. GeckoView prompt. If you browse the web, you will see a bunch of alerts, or if you want to upload a file, you need a file picker and so on. This is done by this prompt delegate that gets all those requests, and then the app decides to show UI for that. For now, we are just going to delete it because that's also an Android component that can provide all those things. Okay. I assume we already broke a bunch of stuff, so let's just start building. What? Test. Okay. I think the sound is back. If I can trust the mixer, then the microphone sound should be back. Let's go back. So you can hear me, please confirm in the chat. It's back, awesome. Okay, that is pretty annoying. I hope not many people follow. So I wanted to look at the layout, and I came across WebView, which reminded me that we had this interface. Because as I said, Focus started as a WebView app, and we slowly migrated it over to GeckoView, which meant we needed an intermediate state where we could support both. And that's where we introduced WebView, which is an interface where we had a WebView and GeckoView implementation of. And then at build time, we decided which one we actually used. And that is almost like we've built this in Android components too, as this concept component, which contains a bunch of interfaces and data classes that an engine needs, and then we have multiple implementations of that. So that is not something we are going to need anymore, because that is going to be provided by Android components, which means we also need to replace this in the view. And see if I can type this without looking it up. Components, concept, engine view, I think. And also double check here. Mozilla concept engine view, yeah, be fine. This means that either the fragment or the activity needs to translate this fragment, this interface into an actual view class, depending on what it wants to use, because otherwise we inflate the layout and Android doesn't know how to instantiate this class because it's just an interface. Probably in the activity. Let's see, is there a create view? Yeah. Okay, if we find an WebView, we ask the WebView provider. Yeah, back then we had multiple implementations based on the build type. They created different ones, and I think it's probably now maybe just one. Doesn't matter. We don't need this anymore. We don't want to go through that. Okay, so nowadays we want to see if we find an engine view. Let's reuse this part. And then we need to create an engine view instance. Let's see, where do we put this? I think for now we just maybe create a components package. That's something to clean up later on. We just want to get it working for now. And then I think we use an engine provide, oops, not XML file. Let's take a peek at Phoenix or reference browsers, fine too. Here we have an engine provider object as well, which can create the engine and then view. I think we can almost just copy this. So all the imports. Let's deal with the crash handling later. Since Gecko is using multiple processes and is also running a lot of native code, it has capabilities to catch crashes in those processes or in the native code, and then it will tell us about it, but we will do this later. Telemetry, for now let's ignore this. And creating an engine. So usually when you use the concept component or an implementation of it, you need to create an engine, which is a global instance of the engine that you're using. You need a view if you want to display something, and you create a bunch of sessions for every tab basically in a browser. And a client is something we can ignore for now. An engine can also provide an HTTP client, because almost any web engine probably has one or is one, depending on how you see it. Okay. So now we have this singleton that will get or create Gecko runtime that is internally not important, but it can create an engine if we need one. And then let's see, do we already have a singleton that cares about components here? Do? Okay. Here we actually can see that Focus has a dummy engine, and this is only because some of the components code that Focus is already using is already expecting an engine. So we created this dummy in Focus just to have some object to pass to it. The code of Focus is never using this, so it didn't matter. We just needed instance. Now we can get rid of this. I assume the components class is like in our other browsers. A different singleton will hold an instance to this object, and it keeps references to our global objects that a browser needs, like a session manager and search engine manager, and from now on also an engine. We will just lazily create an engine by asking the provider to create one for us. Okay, first difference is this thing needs a context, so it cannot be it wasn't an object. I thought it's an object, so this now needs a global application context to work. Pass this to the provider. Does it need more? Default settings. Okay, for now we will just create an instance of this. Yeah, is good enough for now. Add a comment here to do add actual settings. I don't remember where Focus gets them. We just want a working browser for now. So, and now the session manager can get an actual engine and not the dummy anymore. Back to the fragment. Create view. It's the wrong one. Oh, that's actually the fragment. Back to the activity. So now we have access to the components here. Yeah. So I assume there is, yeah, like in our other browsers, there's an extension method on context that gets the components from the application object, and the application object on create creates basically creates a components object which will keep the references to our global objects that we want to have around all the time. So components, we now have an actual engine, and we can ask the engine to create a view for us. Awesome. And it's red. Oh, yeah. Since it returns an engine view is an interface, because we need different implementations of this. Because of that, it's not also a view, because in Android a view is a class and there's no view interface that we can use. So we have this little helper that you can call on it as view, which will basically just do the casting for you. You could do manually too, but using this method is sometimes just nicer to read. Okay, so now whenever Focus tries to create an engine view somewhere in the layout, like we did in the fragment browser, whenever it hits this interface, it will now ask the engine provider, give me an engine view, and this thing will, at the end of the day, sorry, once back. We will go to the engine and then ask the engine to create a view, which in our case will right now always be in Gecko engine, so always be Gecko engine view. Okay, one step closer. Let's just hit compile and see where it breaks. Why don't you get an engine, session manager, and so on with Dagger? That's an option too. Focus is not using Dagger at the moment, so I don't want to have the pain of also introducing Dagger at this point. You could use Dagger for that. Wait, is it not building? Supertypes of the following classes cannot be resolved. And I like that it doesn't actually tell me. Ah, here, it's hidden. Okay, those are all the compile errors we were expecting to show up, so that is totally fine. Let's see. The view provider, yeah, we no longer need to import this in the application object. Apparently it had a method to determine which engine to use. We only care about GeckoView, so ignore this. No value passed for context, yeah. So we created this new context parameter. We are in the application object here, so we can just pass the application object. Since it's a singleton, this is also the only context we want to pass in here. So let's continue. Info activity. Okay, if I remember correctly, there are some ways to... This is not it. To show some kind of in-app browser that shows some things. This one maybe is a browser. But that's, as far as I remember, is the info activity. Something that renders web content but not the actual web. Anything else here? No. I need to double check this, but basically it's the same thing. See if we can find the view. Out. It's a toolbar, it's a frame layout, and into the frame layout, I guess, we inject, or in this case, the fragment. Okay, one level deeper. We have an info fragment, and this info fragment contains, again, this WebView, and then at runtime we decide what kind of view this is going to be. We want this also to use, concept engine view. And then back to the activity. Whenever it inflates, we need to do the same thing. It finds an engine view. Let's see, this one is actually a little bit more complicated. We use WebView for focus rights as a workaround to link to other internal pages. Focus info. Oh, sorry, focus rights. Okay, that is actually the internal page. Yeah, that's the same as this. So this is inside the info activity, and we use WebView because apparently it was easier to link to internal pages. It's not an internal page. Well, something to figure out another time. For now, we just again get our components, get the engine, ask it to create a view, and cast it to an actual view instance. And then this is another to do figure out internal linking. I don't really want to introduce WebView again just for this, so let's see how we are going to fix this. Let's continue here. Main activity, I think we already removed those pieces. So let's get rid of the imports. Browser fragment has a full screen. Callback. Let's comment this out. We have a full screen feature that takes care of most of the things you need. Like if you're on YouTube and you click on the full screen button, the activity needs to go to full screen mode and so on. So for now, let's ignore full screen. We just want this thing to run. So as said before, the first step is let's replace all the existing engine pieces with our component pieces and then reintroduce the features we broke and then reintroduce or fix the bugs this has caused, and then finally hand this off to QA to do an actual good and thorough testing. So WebView provider preload. I don't remember what this did, so let's look at the code on GitHub because I already removed this. Preload calls on the WebView provider preload. Preload. Okay, it creates the Gecko runtime. We can do this too and sends telemetry event on switch to Gecko. I don't think that is probably no longer needed. I assume that back when we had the option to run both, that this mattered. Like when we had the WebView version worked on a GeckoView version and we needed to transition, we did this as an A/B experiment where we slowly introduced more users to the GeckoView version. And that was the only time where we supported actually switching an engine. And there was a hidden menu where you could switch yourself, know where it was. And the creating of the Gecko runtime is nice because then Gecko is already running, and after you've like typed into the URL bar and start loading a page, Gecko is already running, and then it's faster to load the page. So you want to do this quite early in the application lifetime, and it looks like we did this in the main activity. We could also do this in the application now, I think. And I think that's where we do this in Phoenix as well. Phoenix is the code name of Firefox Preview for new Android browser. So, add a comment here. Maybe move because not sure right now if this is the best place to actually do this, but we can get the engine again, and then I think we have a method on that does something like this. Yeah, warm up. This will make sure that the engine is already running and ready to load pages as soon as the users typed something. Okay, so we don't need this here. It's the next references. Session observer. If all sessions were removed, where are we actually? In the main activity. Then we go back to the URL input screen, which is, by the way, this here. And we do some cleanup. Okay, that was only needed for WebView. And in any case, we probably would not need to do anything here because now we pass the actual engine to the session manager. So the session manager can now take care of telling the engine to close or open new engine sessions for tabs as needed. So a bunch of those things needed to be handled manually in Focus. That's now all our components doing. And at the end of the day, once this thing is a PR on GitHub, we expect a lot of code to get deleted and not much added, actually. Which, yeah, is what we expect from using components, right? We don't want to maintain this ourselves. Perform cleanup, was this the method we just looked at? No, that's a different one. Okay, also only for WebView. Let's get rid of it. Let's create callback. As this used. Okay. Create callback. This is handling all the things, all the events that are coming out of the engine. You can see enter full screen, exit full screen, download has started. As mentioned before, we now have components for that, so we later just need to drop in a full screen feature and a downloads component, and all those things should just work without needing any code here. And this is for the old WebView interface, so definitely don't need this here. Let's run this once more, find the next compile errors. If you have tuned in later on during the stream, what we are doing is we are working on Focus for Android, which is a privacy browser for Android. It is using our GeckoView engine, and it has a lot of handwritten, handcrafted code to deal with the browser engine. And we are going to replace this code with a so-called engine component from our Android components project. And then all those components code will take care of that, and you don't need to maintain this in Focus. This component code is already used in Firefox Preview. And so it's stable, it's out, it's released, and we can use it in Focus now too. Focus is just older than the component, and therefore it doesn't use any of that code yet. Well, it uses a bunch of components nowadays, but not the engine just yet. Yeah, let's continue. Adding to home screen. So you can add shortcuts to the home screen, and then you can click them and you will open a web page in Focus directly. And to do this, we are asking the WebView for the URL. I guess I don't care about this feature right now. We just want the browser to basically browse right now. And then we fix those tiny things at the end. Okay. Apparently we now broke some interfaces here. Browser fragment inherits from web fragment. And that has access to a WebView instance or iWebView, and that's callback I don't remember all the reasons for that. Okay. This one overrides on create view as well. Interesting. Can we just override this too? Oh no, that's a fragment. Okay. And then looks up the WebView instance and sets the callback. Okay, that is definitely not needed anymore. And then does some other things. Not important right now, so let's move on. And then there's an option to actually get the WebView. I wonder why we did this. Because at least in Android components, the WebView is just a thing that renders engine sessions anymore. It doesn't have any state, so you would never ask it for the URL, for example. Instead, you have those session objects, which have all the state in it. And whenever the engine sends events, like I loaded this page, then this session object gets updated. So I think there's almost no reason anymore to access the view, as long as you don't do very view specific things like taking a screenshot of the website. That is of course happening on the view, because that depends on how you render the page. Let's comment out some stuff here. Yeah, this is taking care of the life cycle, and there's not something we will need to do that complicated anymore. And for now, let's also comment out the way to get the WebView. Then we will find all the code that tried to do this, and then we can see if we can change that. So load initial URL. Okay, I see. So back in Focus, we called all the things on the view, which is a bit weird now that you know how it works in components. The modern way to load a URL. Well, there's a complicated and easy way. Let's look at the complicated first. You'd go to the components and can I access them? Yeah. Go to the session manager. You ask for the engine session for this session. And then you can load the URL on it. I'm just seeing we do this when the session is null, and or if there's no state. Okay, we need to get back to this, otherwise we will spend too much time on this now. To do what? And then restoring state, something we won't need to do manually later. So let's just comment this out, move on. Okay. Get WebView. Okay, now we hit all the things that needed to talk to the WebView. Find lister for finding page. That's also a feature component nowadays. To do for later. Exiting full screen feature will take care of that. Move on. Erase. That is probably the callback for this erase button that comes up. It's not here. Type here. Yeah. This little trash can icon that removes a browser session. What does it do? That's the WebView. And some accessibility events, and then calls cleanup. Then we remove and close the session. Oh wow, there's a lot of manual session handling here. Get rid of some of this engine session handling. There's something the session manager will take care of. However, one thing we need to do here at some point is erase all browsing data. Not something we need to do for the first iteration of migrating this app over. Share current URL. Okay, this is again talking to the WebView instance or iWebView implementation to get the URL. Mentioned before that should no longer be needed because you can get this from the session. Like get the URL, get the title. And just need to add this to the share intent here. Not going to do this now. Navigating forward and backward. Stop loading. For now, the first goal is get this to compile, then get this to load a website, then add in back the things we commented out by using the new way of doing things. Open in Firefox Focus. That is an action that shows up in custom tabs. Custom tabs is something for later too. Finding page handling. Important right now. Update toolbar button states. Okay. Either those are buttons over here or in tablet mode. I think there are buttons in the toolbar as well. As before, that is a detail we can look at later. Can go forward. So those things we can now just read from the session. And could replace the code that calls this, but maybe not now. Actually, maybe just ignore it. Let's add those step by step. Go back. There's nothing for now. Load the URL. I wonder how much functionality I want to add now. Loading a URL might actually be important. But we don't need this. Because we can just load whatever URL from code for now and just make sure it works. That blocking UI. Ignore. That should request desktop. Okay, I already see that call into the view quite often, and that can get annoying later on, because we need to rewrite this to use features, talk to features of our components. And then we will need the session and not the view. I'd find in page. Yeah, this code I expect to just get deleted later on. Again, there are feature components that provide things like find in page, and you would never need to manually update views and things like that in your code. You can provide a custom view if you need to, but easy way to integrate this is just drop the component, tell it where to render the find in page view, and then it will just take care of everything for you. Okay, let's see if we are closer to actually getting this to compile again. There are still a bunch of classes to go through, but the browser fragment is almost done. Okay, full screen mode, ignore, and find in page callback, ignore 2. So that's the browser fragment, awesome. The info fragment, such a side feature that I almost wonder if we should completely ignore it. The callback, this code is gone. Okay, now it's not read anymore anyways. Web context menu. Wow. That's a lot of code. Focus to that. So if you long press, for example, on a link, we show this context menu that gives you options like, I want to share this link. And same for pictures, for example, you can share this image and so on. And you may have guessed it, there's a context menu component that can do all those things for you. So I don't think we want any of that code in Focus. So I think I will just delete this. Session callback proxy. What was that? Oh yeah, I remember. As I mentioned before, the engine emits a bunch of events, like I loaded this page, the title changed to this, I want to download something. And then we have a session object that has all the state that you can ask, what is the URL, what is the title, the current page. And there needs to be something that translates those events and then updates the state. And Back in Focus, looks like this session callback proxy did this. And it also had the ability to delegate, because Focus was in this weird in-between state where some of those things are on the session and Focus already asked the session for it, and for other things Focus had implemented its own callback just because that's how we did things in the beginning. And so we ended up with this weird proxy that for some things updates the state, for other delegates to another callback. And if we are done with this, this should completely not be needed anymore. Components take care of state updates and notifying you about state updates and so on. And the callbacks need all to be replaced with things that react to state changes and not listen to engine events. So remove it and see what else breaks. Clean up session observer. Okay, so that thing apparently observes the session manager, and when we remove a session and it was the last one, we do some cleanup, and if all sessions were removed, those are kind of different callbacks in Focus, then we perform this cleanup too. That was primarily needed for WebView, I think, because WebView still left a bunch of files behind that we needed to remove manually. And can leave this class as a reminder, but in a world where we have Android components, we might be able to do this as a middleware. A very short version of that is in Android components. We have a browser store that has a reference to the browser state, and whenever state changes, things send actions to the store. The store will internally update the state and then notify everything that wants to know about those changes that something has changed. You can have middlewares that see everything that's coming out and in and out, and they can act based on that. So for example, a middleware could see, okay, an action came in and now we don't have any sessions anymore, so maybe I need to perform some cleanup now. We need to do this later. Okay, GeckoView prompt and nested GeckoView. That is no longer needed. Oh, this is the old WebView provider that gave you a GeckoView when you needed one. Don't need this anymore. Let's see. The goal is to have a pull request that removes a bunch of things and everything still works. Okay, browser fragment. Now complaining about things we removed, sure. Session manager extensions. Okay, that is a lot of engine session handling again, something I don't want to do manually anymore. And like we can eventually remove those extension methods completely because they just call a different method now. So this is the way to go on Mozilla, fixing problems by deleting code? Yeah, that is the goal for today. We are working on Focus for Android. and replace all the custom browser engine handling that is way too complicated with a component we wrote that's already used in Firefox Preview. And yeah, the end result is hopefully that we just delete a bunch of stuff and it's still going to work and using the same code as Firefox Preview, so less things to maintain. Okay, handle external URI. I don't think I care about this right now. Seems to show some kind of dialog. If you leave the app, you just need to get rid of my WebView in here. It's the WebView just for loading URLs. Okay, let's just shortcut this somehow. Let's get rid of the WebView here. I assume this is going to need a session object later, but let's just make it compile. It's this typo. Okay, next, settings. Let's close some. Okay, settings. Some reason needs a provider. This first Gecko run. Okay, I wonder why our code cares. No usage found. Okay, let's delete this. System WebView. So this is the implementation of WebView, this interface for web views in Focus, and System WebView is like the actual Android WebView. As mentioned before, Focus used WebView before, then we migrated to GeckoView, and we still have this code that can deal with both, because it just talks to an interface everywhere. We don't need this anymore, and I don't think we actually ship a WebView version of Focus to any store anymore, so it's a good time to just get rid of it completely now. Okay, let's see what else is red. Okay, the import, that is easy to fix. Remove those two. Okay, it's never used. Okay, we treat warnings as errors, so we need to get rid of the warnings too. We could disable this temporarily, or we just make it compile. It's only like 5 warnings. My favorite way of doing this, if I need to do it quickly, is just calling hashcode on the thing, and then it's used. We do this everywhere. Actual WebView. Stop. Okay, another try. Are you using Flutter? No, I'm not. I think Flutter is a good tool for a bunch of things, but I don't think it's good for building browsers. Okay. a parameter. Classic WebView provider. So we saw the Gecko WebView provider, which could return an iWebView instance that use GeckoView, and this is the same thing that can do this for an Android WebView. Delete tracking protection WebView client. Focus blocks a bunch of trackers. For example, ads that track you over multiple pages. And Gecko, Mozilla's browser engine, has tracking protection built in, and you can control it the way you like it. WebView does not, so we had to implement our own thing that tries to do the same. And that is what this tracking protection WebView client does. Looks at all the resources that are getting loaded and determines, is this a tracker? Should we block this? Since we are using GeckoView now, we don't need this anymore. And even if we would want that with WebView, the component that implements the engine with WebView can do this too. So we ported this over to Android components. But yeah, not needed in Focus anymore. Let's run this. I'm not that into Android development, but I've heard lots about Flutter being really good and reducing development time. I guess it depends on who you're talking to. Like, it seems like there are two strong sides. One loves Flutter completely, and the other one doesn't like it at all. I haven't used Flutter myself, so I don't have a strong opinion, I guess. But from looking at Flutter, I think it's good for some things, but not all the things. And there's always this risk of like betting. If you build something now, will Flutter really be around in 2 years? So I would use Flutter maybe if I need to like build an app for the World Cup next year. I know this app will have a limited lifetime. I will need to ship this to Android and iOS, so maybe I use Flutter. For shared code, by the way, we have this in our browsers too, like we are syncing bookmarks and history, and in the past we implemented this for all the platforms, and now a team inside Mozilla develops one library in Rust, and this Rust library used on Android nowadays, and I think on iOS too now. And yeah, that's a way how we want to share some of the code. But there's no interest, I think, right now to share actual UI code, which is what Flutter mostly enables, I guess. Okay, back to this code. Classic WebView provider. Where the hell is this used? Did I already remove this? Let's run again. Okay. Thank you for following. The last time someone followed, my microphone stopped working, so I hope this time my microphone is still working. At least looking at the sound mixer, it's still doing things. So I hope you can still hear me. Okay, let's see. Focus WebView client. Okay, this is on top of the tracking protection WebView client we looked at previously. It's doing all those weird things. I think it's not needed anymore. Error pages, not needed. Components do this. Thank you for following. Is there a repo for the project you're working on? Yes. Let me repeat what I'm actually working on. So I'm working on Focus for Android, Firefox Focus, or in German-speaking countries, Firefox Klar. It's a privacy browser from Mozilla. Looks like this. The main features are that it's blocking all kinds of trackers and ads that track you. And you have this nice little trash can icon, and all your browsing history is gone. So it's a nice app for quick browsing and in cases you don't want to pollute your own browsing history. So it's a great default link handler on Android actually, because if you click on random links in other apps, it will just open in Focus and you can decide to open them in your actual browser if you really need to. And then we have another project, Android Components, where we build a bunch of Android libraries that you can use to build browsers or browser-like applications, mostly apps that do things with the web. And Focus is older than the Android Components project, so not all of the components we wrote are already used in Focus. So I'm trying to migrate Focus over to use one important component, and that is the concept engine component, which abstracts away which kind of browser engine you're using. Mozilla has its own called Gecko or GeckoView on Android, and Android comes with WebView, and this component abstracts it away. As long as you use those interfaces in this component, you can use either WebView or GeckoView or switch dynamically whatever you want. And since Focus is older, it has all this manual code to deal with the engine. And once we use our component, we can get rid of all of that and also use our other components that interact with an engine. And yeah, on GitHub you can find all of those repos in the Mozilla Mobile org. Android Components is the one with all the components, and Focus for Android, the one we are working on right now. And right now I removed the WebView and GeckoView code that we had in Focus, and I'm now step by step replacing or commenting out the code that used this to just get the app running, and then replace this step by step with our component code. And yeah, the goal is to have all this code live in a component being shared between our other apps and Focus. And then in Focus we will remove a bunch of code and it would still work. That is the goal here. Oh, finally some comments in the file. Yeah, so at least in the Android Components project we tried to write a bunch of comments, and yeah, this is a nice file that is open right now, really explaining what's going on. That's cool. You're streaming open source project. Most people just stream stupid personal projects. Yeah, I mean, it's my day job, so it's maybe cheating a little bit. But yeah, it's open source. Contributors are always welcome, and we are always happy to mentor people if they want to get into open source or our projects. Okay. Back to this WebView client. So WebView client is a class you assign to a WebView. We'll get a bunch of callbacks like on page finished. And then in Focus we do a bunch of stuff to update state and so on. I'm pretty sure all of that will be done by the component. I will just remove this and later look at this again to figure out what pieces we are missing, if any. But for now I just want to get it to compile, and commenting out in this file doesn't make any sense because it's not used anymore. I'm working on an electronic simulator that works on cloud. It's an open source project still in development. This is the repo. eSim Cloud. Let's open this up. Okay, that looks interesting. It's way too complicated for me right now to try to understand it though. But I will keep the tab open. Link handler. Okay, so this is implementing the view on long click handler, and then on a long click we ask the WebView what did we actually long click on, and then we show context menu. I think I showed this before, but let's show this again. You know the context. Like if I long press on this button, there's a link. I see this context menu to share it or copy it. Same with images. On videos it should work too. And surprise, there's a component now that can show those context menus. So there's no need for Focus to manually do this anymore. So we won't try to make this work. Let's delete it. Localized content. Okay, this is when you open URLs like Focus. I'm still not sure why my backspace key is not working in the emulator. I mistype again. Focus about. So those are internal pages, and they need to get translated, and there's this class that takes the content translated, injects it into the WebView again. I don't want to deal with that right now, so actually this is currently not used anymore, so let's, you know what, this is not used right now. Let's comment this out. We definitely will need this content at some point again to inject it back into our browser. But yeah, not now. Oh, I thought Kotlin is supporting nested comment. Oh, it's, oh wow, this is still a Java file. Oh my god. Yeah, that is nice. Like in Kotlin, you can have this, what's the actual name? I don't remember. Block comments. You can nest block comments. So if you have a block comment enclosing other block comments, it will work. In Java, it does not. So I guess we will have to take this by turning those into not block comments. Oh, okay, the repo you showed is your day job. Yeah, it's nice working on open source projects. Then you do not need to keep so many secrets and you can just show your work. Nice. Okay, what is this thing doing? That's the info activity again. It's this internal activity, this one that shows some web content, but it looks like UI. Oh, okay, that is constant we just removed. Let's just keep the constants around then. Okay. Run. Cannot find symbol class I WebView. Yes, we removed this. Okay. I stream coding as well, but for like an hour or even less. Okay, that's cool. I should follow you. I will do it after this stream though. Yeah, please let me know if this is interesting at all. This is like my second time I'm streaming this stuff, so I'm just still trying to see if it's interesting. And it looks like we actually compiled the app again, so that is a success. I think it crashed, which is completely expected after we removed a bunch of stuff and commented out a bunch of stuff. Let's see. No, this is Phoenix. We don't. Just the focus. Focus. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, that's the crash. Great. Now we can go to phase 2, which is making it work, I guess. First fixing the obvious crashes, and then slowly adding the features back in that we. So let's see. I usually don't use the logging inside Android Studio, so I'm going to switch to a shell now. Okay, that is much more readable for my eyes. Let's see. Restart. Let's just start again. Gecko runtime is shutting. Let's see if this was the actual error. What's happened later? Okay. Gecko runtime is shutting down. Okay, that is not super helpful right now. Are we running the right variant? Let's see. Let's start by looking at the build files. We include the engine. Okay, is this caused by this? No, we are doing the warm-up. Okay, this is not a super helpful crash I was hoping for, so now we need to work backwards. Let's see, we end up in the main activity. Let's see what you're right. I'm just confused why there were so many problems from the start. You mean on the code? Because I removed the old code and then wanted to find all the code that was using it to comment it out or replace it, so on. I find it really interesting because if I want to contribute to Firefox Focus, if I wanted to know anything, I can easily talk to you here. Yeah, that is one of the reasons, I guess, I wanted to try this. I hope it's a nice way to maybe get into those open source projects if you're interested in them. Okay, let's see. I think we saw the app start, right? Yeah, there's Focus. We are in the URL input fragment. And it's not. Oh, it is crashing. Okay. Takes a couple of seconds, which might mean that Gecko is starting up and crashing immediately. So let's try to not do the warm-up. I wonder if this has any effect. There still might be someone else calling things on the engine. And then it will get created anyways. And crash. Yeah, there it is. And it's this. Oh, okay, I know. I finally know. That might be hard to fix, but we will try, I guess. Currently, we are creating a Gecko engine in this components class, and this components class is referenced by the focus application, which is the application object. It will get created on process launch, and whenever someone needs an engine, it goes through the components object to the engine property, and this will lazily create an engine. The problem we might be seeing here is that Gecko uses a bunch of processes, and we might run into a situation where we try to create an engine object inside one of those Gecko processes, and that's not what we want, right? We only want one in the main process, and as soon as we start another Gecko inside one of those child processes, I think the whole thing explodes. And the reason why this might be happening is because Android creates an application object for every process. And if anything in here is actually calling into the engine, then this will also happen in child processes. So we need to make sure that this is not the case. So we should definitely not do the warm-up here for every process. But I just commented it out, so there might be other situations. And if you look at Phoenix, map Phoenix. Phoenix again is the code name of Firefox Preview, our new Firefox browser. This is the on-create of the application project of Phoenix, and it does some checks like, is this the main process? No, if not, then let's not do the things here and only do those things, and otherwise do those the main process too. And we need to do something like this in Focus too. The hard part now is, since I'm not familiar with the code that much anymore, is to figuring out which things need to happen in which process. All of them need to happen in the main process. So I think we might get away for now by just only doing things in the main process. Let's see, we have a little helper in Android components that does this checking for you. Let's see, is main process, where's this coming from? Oh yeah. Support KTX is a component where we have some Kotlin extensions that we think are helpful. Like the Android team also has like KTX versions of their libraries. We have just a KTX component that contains a bunch of extensions that we use. Let's see if we are actually importing this into Focus already. Support KTX. Yeah, okay. So might be able to just import this here. Is main process. Yeah, good. Okay, let's try the simple thing first, and that is doing all of those things only in the main process. Let's see if we get a different result now. Okay, launching. Yeah, not crashing. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so for now, let's keep it as this. Let's add a to-do. Figure out what to do in child process. Okay, so I don't expect it to actually load a page if I type now. Yeah, fresh. Because this is part of the things we commented out. I'm just surprised that the app went away and we don't see a crash though. Let's do this again. Is it logging? Okay, here's the crash. That looks better. So browser fragment on view created and then on loading state changed. On view created line 3, 4. So we register session observer. Session is the state object that knows which page you're on and so on. So we register an observer and then interestingly we call methods ourselves on the observer, which is because we want to update the views with the initial values. Okay, that is a little bit hacky. And in the new version, where you are using a browser store, it will give you the initial value immediately. This is still using the old code where you register those callbacks and it tries to invoke those callbacks itself to let the app know. So, that is interesting. So we are running into a null pointer exception in line 341, which is the loading state session. Okay, loading is never null actually, so session can be null. Okay, this makes me wonder if we need to migrate this to the new code too. But we probably can't until we use the engine. Let's see, we could... I actually want to what is null here. Like, oh yeah, the session. We just saw that. Who sets the session? In onCreate, we either find a session if we got an ID, in cases where the app tells us please display this specific, let's say tab in this case, or we just create a new one. But this is happening in onCreate, and previously we were in on view created, so this is happening later on. So is it really the session that is null? You know what? Should we just ignore it for now? Yeah. Oh no. Let's actually make sure this is actually the thing we are seeing here. Because I want to know if it's null. Yeah, this whole code needs to change. There's so much manual handling here of the session. That's all not needed anymore. If you use all the components, you basically add a session component and tell it either render always the same session or just follow whatever tab the user selected. And if you do that, then you don't need the manual session handling. Okay, the session is definitely not null. It's showing me a different line here, I think. Oh, it actually goes inside the method. That is probably something I missed previously. So we actually don't have any null values here. We jump into the thing. And then we go to 1451. And we have some background transition group. We want to start a transition on. I don't care about this right now. Probably if some of the code we commented out did set the transition or something like that. Or we need to set the transition in the view. Maybe we removed it from the view. Doesn't matter. Okay, let's focus. Okay, and we switch to the browser. So this part is working again. We just need to tell it to actually load the page. That is something we commented out earlier. So let's try to get this piece working. I think there was this method load initial URL. Not in a fragment. Where was that? Don't remember. Let's go to Focus. Oops, let's search here. Oh, web fragment. So one layer below browser fragment. The view gets created. And then we oh yeah, there are two things we are missing here. One is the view and the session, they are not actually connected yet. So this view here doesn't even know it needs to display the session. And then the loading part, I think, will happen automatically. Because the thing, we tell the view, hey, render the session, and then it realizes, oh, I actually need to load this as well, and then it will do this. So let's ignore this part. Yeah, it doesn't do anything here. So let's try to get this set up. And let's also look at Phoenix. There's a session feature that we need to integrate. Why can't I find this here? Because there is also a base browser fragment. Like we did in Focus, where we have this web fragment below the browser fragment. There's also a browser fragment and a base browser fragment in Phoenix. And this one has the session feature. And we go to the place where it's used. The session feature, you pass it the view, the session manager, know the use case for now, and either an ID for a tab or not. And then the session feature will take care of telling the view which session to render, either the ID you gave it, or if you don't, always the selected tab. And then no matter where the user switches the tab, the thing will make sure to always tell the view, hey, now render this session, now this one. And that's what we want to have in Focus 2. Let's take this over to Focus. We need this in the web fragment. We could do it in a web fragment, I guess. We can also move it later on. I'm still not sure how we should deal with the info fragment thing, the thing that shows app UI as, or web content as app UI. Maybe we should get rid of this completely because it's just making things super complicated. Maybe we should just build native UI for the things. That seems more reasonable, and I think we even did this in Phoenix. Anyhow, let's see. I think we don't import this feature yet. So this is a different component. In a nutshell, we have those browser components that provide things like a browser toolbar or browser context menu. And then we have those feature components that connect all the things together, like the feature session, our session handling and browser session connected with the browser engine implementation. So it's the glue code in between. That's what we need here. For now, let's add it to the web fragment. Needs a reference to the view. So in onCreateView, we are going to give it the reference to the view session feature. Thank you for following. Test. The first time today someone followed, the microphone stopped working for a moment, but it looks like it's still working. Okay, cool. Session feature. Let's copy this over to Focus. Where do we actually do this in Focus? Either on create view or on view created. Okay, initialize UI. Where is this called? On view created. Okay. Create view. On view created. And then we need the session feature. It's a session manager. We can get this by calling components, session manager. Okay, components is actually nullable in a fragment. What we did in Phoenix is what we want here too. We created a require components version that is not nullable, because there are situations where you know you have a context. That's where you can use require context, and this is basically the same for components. Oh, and I just rewrote the thing we have 2 lines below. Let's use require components here. Session use cases. Quick explanations. Use cases. You will see this in Android components every now and then. Use cases wrap a couple of functionality together into an object that you can call simple methods on. In the case of sessions, you might want to create a new tab. Creating a new tab means you need to create a session. You need to tell the session manager about it. Then you might want to start loading those. And session use cases, just for example, has a method that does all those things for you. And since that is very handy, we pass those around to other components. So components can just call into this use case to do some great fancy thing without needing to write all those code in all those places. And then it needs the view. Let's see. Close this for a second. Where do we get the view from? Okay, right now it just is a view with the ID WebView. We can, I guess, just do this for now by doing the lookup ourselves here. And cast this to an engine view. And then we can give it an ID. We have one. I guess if we have a session here, we can use that ID. Not sure if this is the right thing here. Because either, I'm still not sure how Focus is handling its session. It's super weird that we have this session object here on the fragment. We might not want this. We can change this later on. For now, the goal is to get this page loaded. I think that's everything that is needed, right? Okay, back presses. Back presses is something we could start handling too. What this feature does is if you press the back button on your phone, while there is browsing history in your current tab, pressing back should navigate back and not leave the activity until you reach the end of the history inside this tab. This feature will just do this for you. Maybe it does even more. The contract is basically that whatever a session needs to do on a back press, it either do this here or not. And looks like we don't have this handling inside this class just yet, so I will just slate it to handle on back press forward to feature. Okay. Let's see what this does. Go to mozilla.org. Okay, it did not render anything at all yet. That is okay. Look at the log. Actually do this again. Browser fragment. Okay, we might be rendering about blank, or we might not. That's something to figure out. First, let's do this again. Oops. Want to look at the log. Hey, go away. Okay, we are going to mozilla.org. Okay, at least we have a session here that points to that website. That part looks good. It just does not get rendered. Or not loaded. Or both. Let's go back. Do we have an onView created? Okay. So this is the first issue. We have onView created in both fragments or both classes. So we never actually call into this method. So let's do this first. Because we need to tell the web fragment on lower that the view was created. And then this feature gets set. While this is building, you may have seen that this session feature is actually wrapped in a view-bound feature wrapper. What the thing does is, since the feature is keeping a reference to the view, and the fragment is keeping a reference to the feature, there can be a situation where the fragment gets detached, the view gets destroyed, but you still have the session feature here that keeps a reference to the feature, which keeps a reference to the view. So you're essentially leaking the view. What this view-bound feature wrapper does for you is it clears the session, it clears the instance session feature when the view goes away. And since we created new one and onView created, we just set new instance here, and this thing will remove it automatically. Hey Max, thank you for knowing. Okay, let's see if this does something. How do you stream the emulator and Android Studio window alone with your face at the same time? So I'm using Streamlabs OBS to stream this part of my screen. emulator is inside Android Studio. In this new version of Android Studio, you can have it inside Android Studio. And then in Streamlabs OBS, you can add a bunch of sources like screen, camera, microphone. I mixed them all together for streaming. And you have a ton of filters you can apply, and I just applied a filter to my webcam that removes the background. Yeah, green screen. Okay, let's see if this thing is actually loading something. It is crashing. That is better than before. It's actually better than the white page because it's doing something now. Okay. We have a null pointer exception that looks almost like the one we saw previously. Browser fragment. Line 1445. Surprise, it's again our background transition. Yeah, we completely broke this. Like in this line below, it was already null, so it's here null too. We are now running into the other part of the callback, which means that we are actually loading something. So it wanted to show the background transition and then show a spinner or whatever to show that we are loading. So that is, even though it crashed, it's much better than the white page before. Okay, we saw a loading indicator. The URL is changing and wow, we loaded a website. This is great. You can see the background of the toolbar and the status bar is like dark purple. It should have transitioned into like a gradient, a purple pinkish gradient. And that's, yeah, the background transition that is null here. Since we do not play this transition, it doesn't show the other background. But yeah, as said before, that is not the important thing right now. We just want to get it working, and I'm super happy that it's loading a website. This is awesome. And if you remember, we almost only removed code and commented out code all the time, and it's still a browser that works. Can I click a link? Yeah. And it even shows toolbar loading indicator. I'm not sure if you can see it on the stream though. And update the URL. That's pretty great. Trash can icon. It's gone. Probably isn't really gone because, well, it might be. Maybe it is gone. Yeah. I think that's a good state for today. I'm going to commit this to the local branch, and then we continue migrating tomorrow, I think. Okay, let's create a branch, engine, migration. Let's add all the stuff and let's make a work in progress commit. Let's also push this to my fork just so that it doesn't get lost. Okay, cool. I think that's everything for today. Any more questions I can answer? Otherwise, I will maybe do it again tomorrow. Important question is which color you play in MTGA. All the colors, I guess. I almost build new decks every day, so I don't have one specific color. I started with mostly black and then moved into all of them step by step, I guess. Do you play MTGA? Then if you do, please add me. We can play against each other. Thank you for following person with a very complicated name. Yeah, let's see. Where could we continue tomorrow? Maybe some of the features that we broke. Transition I don't care that much about, but for example, long pressing to get context menu doesn't work anymore. I guess find in page doesn't work. Well, it does show UI, but it shouldn't do anything. Yeah, it's completely broke. We could just tomorrow again remove all this crap. It's not crap, but we'll remove this code, throw in the component, and again, I think the result will be it will just work. I think that's a good goal for tomorrow. Now I continue reviewing some PR that my coworkers are working on and that they're waiting for a review. I'm not going to stream this part. So thank you for watching, and please follow if you liked what you've seen. See ya.